Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Facebook Live chat. For those of you that don't know me, and I think most of you probably do, my name is Mark Goldwine, and I'm the Senior Vice President and Senior Policy Director here at the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. I'm very pleased that all of you were able to join us on this Facebook Live today. As many of you know, we spent a lot of time going through all of the minute details of the budget and analyzing every nook and cranny. But what maybe we don't spend enough time doing is reaching out more broadly, because the truth is anyone can budget and everyone should be budgeting. The only folks that don't seem to get that are your representatives in Washington that have not passed a budget this year, that haven't really passed a serious budget, a budget that actually comes up with a plan for how we're going to control our debt and how we're going to spend our money in many, many years. Fortunately, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget has designed and just yesterday relaunched and updated a tool that allows anyone to decide how they want to spend federal dollars and how they want to raise federal revenue. Now, we weren't able to include every single option. We weren't able to include all that little minutia. But what we are able to do with this tool that we call the Debt Fixer is show you in broad scope the types of policy choices that really our leaders in Washington should be making to get our deficit under control. Now, before I go any further, and for those of you that tuned in late, my name is Mark Goldwine. I run the policy shop here at the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget and at Fix the Debt. And I know over the course of this discussion, many of you are going to have questions and comments. I really want to answer them as best I can. So if you do have questions, just write them down in that, just type them in the little comment area on your Facebook Live, and I'll do my very best to be able to answer them. I have someone here that's going to read them to me so I can focus on this Debt Fixer tool. Now, to get started, I first want to show you all how you can visit the Debt Fixer. I mean, this is web browsing 101, but if you want to use the Debt Fixer, you just go to www.crfb.org, and I'm doing it here, /Debt Fixer. Debt Fixer is the name of the tool, /Debt Fixer is the website, and it'll load up when you come here. I should mention that this is a tool that anyone can use on their own, but it's also a great teaching tool. I teach 2 economics classes, and we use this tool to allow the students in groups to actually debate and discuss what they're going to do with the federal budget and how they want to spend the money. Now, once you've gone to www.crfb.org/Debt Fixer, you'll notice an opening page. If you look right above me, you can see it says Fix the National Debt, and then it has a little bit of a discussion. Now, there is no right or wrong number that we need to hit to make the debt sustainable. There is no exact goal that is the must-pass goal, or else the economy is going to melt down. But there are some things that we know about our fiscal situation. First of all, we know that debt today is higher than it has ever been outside of World War II. And it's headed, by the way, to the highest in the country. Secondly, we know that debt is rising rapidly. You'll see over to the right and above me that by 2028, debt is going to be about 97% of GDP. In other words, almost the entire economy will be debt. Debt will be almost equal to the entire size of the economy. And by 2050, it'll be more than 1.5 times the size of the economy, 160% of GDP. So we know debt is high. We know debt is rising, and not just in nominal dollars, but relative to the economy. And we know that this is unsustainable. We don't know what the breaking point is. We don't know whether the consequence is going to be permanently slower growth or some kind of fiscal crisis. But we know that debt cannot infinitely rise faster than the economy without serious consequences. And so for the purpose of this tool, we've set a fiscal goal designed to get debt on a sustainable path. I mentioned before, this is not the only plausible fiscal goal, but it's one that we thought was reasonable. Our short-term goal, you'll notice right above me again, you have a short-term goal and a long-term goal. Now, only in U.S. politics do we consider 10 years to be short-term. But our 10-year short-term goal is to get debt at 70% of GDP. Why did we pick that goal? First of all, 70 is a nice round number. If I said 68 or 72, you wouldn't remember that. But secondly, right now debt is about 77 or 78% of GDP. So if we have debt at 70% in a decade, what it means is that we know that debt is declining. And that's really what's most important, is we want to get the trajectory from going up to going down. So over 10 years, we want clearly declining debt. We thought 70% of GDP is a reasonable proxy for declining debt. Then we put a long-term goal, your 2050 goal. Now again, you could decide that your appropriate long-term is 2060 or 2045. And you could decide that your appropriate long-term goal is different than one. But we thought what would be reasonable is for debt to eventually return to its historic average. Historically, prior to the Great Recession, debt has been about 40% of GDP. And only in the last decade has debt exploded to about double of that. So we thought over a very long period of time, by 2050, smart governance would try to bring that debt down to its historic levels. Now, some of you may have played this game or used this tool before. Two things you'll notice right off the bat. One is that 97 to 160% of GDP numbers, where things are headed, they're much higher than before. That's because it turns out over the last year, Washington's been just a tad bit fiscally irresponsible. They've passed a series of tax cuts and spending bills. And there's nothing wrong with reducing tax rates or increasing important spending, but they haven't paid for much of any of it. And so our debt situation is now substantially worse than it was before. And as you'll see in this tool, if we extend the policies that they enacted over the last decade, many of which were temporary, but in name only, the debt would get even worse still. The second and related thing you'll notice is because the debt is going to be higher, the amount of savings we now need to get to our fiscal goals to get debt down to 70% of GDP is much larger. At the last version of this tool, you needed something like $5 trillion to get debt in a sustainable path. Now you need $7.8 trillion. That's $7,810 billion, which is $7.8 trillion, just to get debt barely declining relative to GDP. Now, this doesn't mean we're going to balance budget. This doesn't mean we're going to pay off the debt. This is just to get debt so it's not rising faster than the economy. We need $7.8 trillion. And it turns out there's only two ways to get that money. Either we can cut spending or we can raise taxes. And given the magnitude of the problem, I think that as most of you use this tool, you'll find that if you want to hit that goal, you're probably going to have to do at least some of both. There's probably going to have to be some tax you raise or some tax breaks you cut if you're a conservative. And if you're a liberal, there's going to be some spending that you reduce because there just isn't enough money to reasonably do it on one side of the budget or the other. Now, perhaps you'll decide, I'd rather have no tax increases and just have higher debt. That's a choice you can make, but of course, debt today is really just a tax on future generations. I want to run through this tool and show you all how it can work by going section through section. I also want to point you to this blue box at the bottom. As I mentioned, I use this in my classroom. I use it both for undergraduate students and for graduate students, but it can also be used in high schools and even, I think, probably 7th and 8th grade for students that want to work together to come up with budget solutions. And if you're interested in doing that, we have a lot of resources to help you use this tool in a more social way where your students can work together. So please do check out that blue box and contact us, and we'll help you. We may even be able to send somebody out to your classroom or to your district or to your Rotary Club or to your town hall to help run through this tool. Now, this tool, as I mentioned, doesn't cover every single tiny policy in the federal government, but it does try to cover every area. So you notice at the top, we have a few different areas of spending and revenue to deal with. We have defense, what we call investments, Social Security, which is the largest government program, healthcare, which is mostly Medicare and Medicaid, other domestic spending, income taxes, and other taxes. So let me take, for example, defense. When I click defense, I could have also clicked the next button down here, and it would take us to the defense page. Now, within the defense page, you have a number of different options, both to reduce and increase defense spending. Next to each option, you have the cost or savings over 10 years. So, for example, one option is we could reduce the number of ships in the Navy fleet. There's supposed to be 292 ships under current law. We could reduce that to 250 ships. That would save about $110 billion over 10 years. And watch what happens when I click that option. Our debt over 10 years, not only does it go down by $110 billion, it also goes down from 97 to 96% of GDP. And our debt in the long term, because this continues to save money, would go down from 160 to 158. Now, that's not a lot by itself, but no one policy by itself is going to solve the debt. You'll notice we're going to select a lot of policies. So for example, maybe I also want to limit veterans benefits. Maybe I want to build a wall and tighten border security. Maybe I want to reduce the number of military personnel, and maybe I want to end the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, not every option I pick saves money. If I add all those together, we now have debt down to 94% of GDP. But there are also options that cost money. For example, starting in just over a year, about a year and a half, defense spending is going to again be subject to an automatic across-the-board sequester, a significant reduction in spending. We might want to avoid that by reversing these sequester cuts. I know many defense experts think that we should reverse many or all of them, but you'll notice there's a cost to that. We've now eaten up a lot of the savings that we had from defense. I want to go to another area that I want to show you how some of these other pieces work. So I'm going to skip around, but you can do these in order by clicking the next button. And I'm going to head to the Social Security page. So within the Social Security page, excuse me, that's a Freudian slip because there is a Social Security age as the first option. Within the Social Security page, you have a number of options to change the retirement age, change Social Security benefits, change the way that inflation is indexed in Social Security, or change the amount of tax revenue coming into Social Security. And you'll notice, not only do these have your short-term savings numbers, each policy, and this is just an example, has a Learn More button. If you don't understand the difference between slowing initial benefit growth for everyone, slowing the initial benefit growth protecting low earners, and slowing the initial benefit growth protecting middle income learners, you can click on the Learn More. And a big text box will pop up that will explain in detail for you or for your students or for whoever's using this what these policies would do in exact detail. Now for something like chained CPI, which we've written many papers on, but I know some of you haven't read all of them, though you should. This Learn More key may be really important because it explains some of the technical details that we just can't cover in a single line. You'll also notice that some of these options are on-off, raise the retirement age to 68 or don't, but some of them are multiple choice. So for example, if we slow benefit growth for everybody, we can't also slow benefit growth only for middle and higher earners. So we have to choose. So I could run through Social Security here, you can see, change the cost of living adjustment. I could subject everybody to the Social Security tax. I could means test benefits, reform the disability program, maybe even increase benefits for higher earners. And as I'm doing this, you might notice my numbers are going down. Before I needed $7.8 trillion, now I only need about $6.2 trillion. And my debt is, I shouldn't say only 91% of GDP because that's very high, but my debt has come down to 90% of GDP. So what I would advise you to do, either in order or by clicking these tabs up at the top, is to go through each category and pick the options that you think are most appealing. If you're doing this individually, you can just pick what you like the best. If you're doing this in a group, it's going to take some negotiation. Maybe start with the areas of agreement and then use the democratic process or the process of persuasion. Maybe one of you likes the public option, but the other of you thinks we should repeal Obamacare altogether. Maybe one of you wants to change Medicare cost sharing so that beneficiaries are more responsible for cost growth, while other views think that providers should be more responsible for cost growth. And you could compromise by doing both, or ask insurance companies to contribute, or lawyers, or you think prescription drug costs are too high. By the way, I'm very concerned about our rising healthcare costs, so in this section I'm going to pick just about everything to get our healthcare costs under control. And if there are any questions, again, please feel free to write them in the comment section. I'm happy to answer. So our next section after healthcare, we have other domestic spending. I'm going to reverse that sequester again, as I did in the defense side. It's only fair. But I'm also going to make some targeted reductions within defense, and I'm going to enact immigration reform. And if I don't understand the policy, again, I'm going to click Learn More, and it's going to tell me how I can, for example, reduce the cost of the federal workforce. So I'm running through this. Now the federal government has a spending problem because spending is rising faster than the economy and spending is rising unsustainably. But we also have a revenue problem because our revenue isn't rising fast enough to keep up. So you cannot talk about fiscal responsibility or balanced budgets or stabilizing the debt if you're not willing to at least look at both spending and revenue. Maybe you'll conclude you only want to make changes on one side, but you need to look at both sides. And so our tool provides you with both sides. Within Social Security, we have the dedicated payroll tax revenue, but outside of Social Security, we have a whole section on individual income tax reform. For example, we have options to significantly modify or extend the tax law that passed just a year ago. If I want to extend the entire tax law, that's going to be quite expensive. The tax law, you might remember, cost about $1.5 trillion, but most of it expired after 8 years. If we continue it, it's going to cost another $700 billion. That's very pricey. Now, I like some parts of the tax law, but personally, I don't think we can afford another $700 billion of tax cuts. So what I'm going to do is extend the tax law, except for the individual rate cuts. I'm going to keep the individual rates of the old policy, extend the other reforms within the law. That's actually going to raise money, because remember, the tax law also cuts some tax breaks. I'm also going to raise the taxes on capital gains and dividends, so they're closer to ordinary rates. I'm going to limit mortgage interest charitable deductions. I'm going to reduce the limit on retirement accounts. I'm going to get rid of private activity bonds, so we don't subsidize stadiums. And I'm also going to lower taxes a little bit by expanding the EITC to childless workers. Now, as I do that, I'm getting much closer to my fiscal goals. I now have debt at 79% of GDP in a decade and 69 in 2050. This is already really good news, because we now know my debt is declining. And that's the most important goal of this whole thing, get your debt down. But I'd like to do better than that. I'd like to get the debt more towards historic averages. Luckily, I still have one category left: other taxes that are not income tax. So for example, I could raise the corporate income tax rate. We cut it recently from 35 to 21. That was quite a cut. We could raise it back to, say, 25, still have most of that cut in place. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it at 21%. But what I am going to do is get rid of the state and local tax deduction for businesses, just like we did for individuals. I'm going to repeal other targeted corporate tax breaks. And I'm going to enact a new carbon tax, because that might help future generations, not only by giving them revenue, but also by reducing carbon emissions. And I'm also going to raise cigarette and alcohol taxes and eliminate a deduction for pass-through businesses. Let's see if I've gotten to my goal. I'm very close. I'm at 74% of GDP in 10 years, 49% in 2050. Just to expedite things, I'm going to add a value-added tax into the mix, and that gets me to my goal right there. I have debt that's exactly at 70% of GDP in 2028, 35% of GDP in 2050. You might notice to get there, I had to cut an awful lot of spending, especially healthcare and Social Security, and I had to raise an awful lot of taxes. But I did it. Now I want to move on to the results page now to show you the output. Once you've selected all of your options, and it might be that you want to go back because you saved more money than you want, or you didn't save enough money and you want to make some tougher choices. But once you are done, you can click the Done button, or at the top of the screen you can click Results, and it'll show you results. It'll show you what you did to stabilize the debt. It'll show you how much you saved in dollars, and it'll also show you where that came from. We skipped the investment section, which is why that's 0. But you'll notice that a lot of my savings comes from that other taxes, probably that last minute value-added tax I added into it, but also from healthcare and Social Security, and to some degree defense and other domestic. Now, a really important thing about this is understanding how the federal budget works, understanding what the options are is important, and we really want you to do it. But what's really important is to make your opinion known. And there's 2 ways that we really need you to do that. One is, once you've finished, please, please, please submit your results. Put your email address, or you can even have no email address, your zip code, your gender, and your party affiliation. And again, you can choose no party affiliation. Submit your results. We're not going to call you up and say, hey, why did you want to raise the retirement age to 68? What we are going to do is take all of your results in an anonymous way and pull them together so we can get an understanding of what our users are willing to do when they're presented with the tough choices and they're presented with fiscal goals. We'd also, sharing your results with us is really important, but we'd also encourage you to share them with your member of Congress and with the public. You can do that through these Facebook and Twitter apps and other forms of social media that I'm not even on, but you can use. You can also print out your results, or at the bottom, if you type in your zip code. Now, my zip code is not going to work because we don't have a congressman in Washington, D.C. But if I say use my parent zip code, it'll tell me who my representatives are. Then I could reach out to them and I could tell them, hey guys, maybe you should get on fixing this debt. It's growing really unsustainably, and while it's not easy to fix it, it's not that hard if you're going to make the tough choices. Here's the ones I made. So we'd really encourage you, submit your results to us, submit them to your member of Congress, share them on social media, use this tool with your friends, and while you're on our website, check out our other interactive tools. We have one on allows you to fix Social Security. We have one that tells you how old you are when Social Security runs out. And we have a website full of information that we hope is going to be helpful to you as you continue to fight with us, fight on our side to get the debt back under control and to get it to stop growing unsustainably. So thank you all very much. I want to remind you again, if you do have any questions, please put them in the comment page. Otherwise, you can check out crfp.org/debtfixer or reach out to us and we'll help you facilitate this in your district, in a town hall, in a classroom. And again, maybe I'll even fly out there. Thank you all very much.